Today on 21st Century Business, explore state-of-the-art technology, innovative business strategies, insights from cutting-edge corporations around the globe, a visionary look into the answers of tomorrow, today. Business leaders, business solutions, 21st Century Business.
Welcome to 21st Century Health. I'm Jackie Bales. Negative pressure wound therapy, or NPWT, is a treatment that applies negative atmospheric pressure onto a wound through a pump, sucking out the drainage. Historically, it's been extremely painful and extremely costly. Joining us to discuss a remarkable innovation that helps solve both of those issues is Cindy Ahern, Director of Clinical Services for Prospera. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you, Jackie. Pleasure to be here.
Also joining us is Professor and Medical Dr. Malin Malmsjö of Lund University in Sweden. Welcome to you too, Dr. Malmsjö.
Thank you so much.
First of all, Dr. Malmsjö, can you elaborate on the difficulties that are seen with the traditional NPWT treatment?
Well, first of all, I would like to take the opportunity to say that negative pressure therapy has really revolutionized wound care during the last little more than a decade that it's been around. However, now we're realizing that there are problems with the therapy. And those problems we're trying to address by doing research, getting back to science, and figuring out how does the therapy work, how can we improve it. And in our hands now are 2 letters from FDA, which are warning letters for complications during negative pressure therapy. And it's mainly about pain during the treatment, pain during dressing changes, and ranges all the way up to bleeding complications from exposed organs. And when, for example, applied over the heart, you can get a heart rupture and the patient can die. And this is what we want to address to optimize the therapy.
Cindy, tell me about Prospera and what Prospera has developed that is so revolutionary.
Prospera entered the market and challenged the conventional thinking. Conventional negative pressure therapy has been offered over the last 10 or 12 years only one way, and that was a continuous therapy at negative 125 millimeters of mercury pressure. And there were some complications that go along with that Dr. Malmsjö related to. And what we found was that as we began to look at the research that supported that conventional therapy, there were a lot of weaknesses in that. So we immediately recognized that we needed to go back and do some controlled scientific studies with wound fillers side by side. And we recognized pressure and wound fillers and mode. And the scientific data that was behind those mechanisms helped us design the Prospera Pro series of pumps. And those pumps are what we are able to take to the patient and improve their quality of life as well as their outcomes.
Well, conquering the issues of pain and complications seems like a desperately needed improvement. So let's see Prospera's innovation in action in this 21st Century Health Field Report.
Chronic wounds have long been the result of poor blood circulation, most often seen in patients with diabetes and those who have been bedridden for any prolonged period of time. Negative pressure wound therapy, or NPWT, works in a number of ways to promote the healing of acute chronic wounds. Until now, previous NPWT treatment has been reported as being both expensive and painful. Prospera has the solution.
Patients are at first a little skeptical because they're used to just sponge wound fillers. Once they have experienced the ease of application of the gauze and see the results of the application, we find that variable pressures are a lot less painful to the patient, plus it stimulates the wound bed, and we're getting really good results.
Prospera promotes wound healing with NPWT to the next level, making it more accessible to patients and providers at a more cost-effective rate while offering positive wound healing outcomes.
The program that we've developed provides a true solution to our customers. The outcomes that we're seeing are very impressive. We're seeing healthcare systems across the country change their current way of thinking to incorporate Prospera.
Traditionally, MPWT has been unaffordable for many patients, which is reflective of narrow market competition. In other words, if a patient's insurance didn't cover it, MPWT was too expensive for most to pay for themselves. Prospera provides a solution that is reimbursed by most third-party payer plans.
The conformability of the antimicrobial gauze makes it truly superior to other choices. You're able to address any undermining, any tunneling, any open areas in a very straightforward manner, with less challenges than you would have if you were using a hydrophobic wound filler.
Prospera strives to provide chronic wound patients with all of the benefits of NPWT, minus the discomfort and costliness. Their efficient system is customized to each patient's needs, with low pressure settings that increase comfort and do away with associated high and low spikes that are typically found with other NPWT treatments. For 21st Century Health, I'm Steve Michaels reporting.
Cindy, why did Prospera enter the NPWT market when it did?
At the time we entered the market, there were only a couple devices out there that were offering negative pressure, and neither manufacturer offered the technology that we knew from our scientific research data needed to be able to be delivered to the patients. So, nor were they being cost effective. So, our entry into the market was very timely because it offered both a higher technology as well as a cost-effective approach.
Cindy, why did Prospera choose to collaborate with Dr. Malmshow in Lund, Sweden for science and development?
Well, Prospera knew that if we entered the negative pressure wound therapy market and challenged conventional therapy and we're going to market some changes, we had better have some concrete scientific data to back that up. So we searched and found Dr. Malmshow in Sweden. She is a world leader in the negative pressure field of study, and she's done more research than anybody else has, published 50 articles or so in peer-reviewed journals, and we felt like we had went to the best.
Wow. So what were the guidelines that you used in creating the Prospera Pro series of pumps?
Our first focus was patient. It's always patient's always number one. So it was, if you think of it in kind of like a triangle, the patient is at the very top. So we want to improve their quality of life, reduce the amount of weeks or months it may be that they have an open wound, and reduce their pain significantly. The other part is the end user, whether it be a nurse on the floor in a facility or a physician in the operating room, or whether it's a family member or a friend trying to learn how to administer negative pressure to a loved one. We wanted it to be something relatively simple and not intimidating and complex. The other side of the triangle is the cost effectiveness. It had to be something, in order to meet these parameters, had to be feasible for a patient to be able to purchase, or regardless of what the reimbursement source was, it has to be cost effective, because not everybody has insurance. That triangle, though, has to be supported by the collaborative scientific data and the development.
So, Dr. Malmshow, how does the design and function of this pump provide an advantage to the patient?
Well, there are a couple of issues which I really enjoyed seeing, that you appreciated the science before you designed the pump. Because from the research we've done, we see that the pressure range that we want to use is different to the pumps that are available today. And also there are other features that I, as a scientist, would like to see. So first, if we go to the pressure range, traditionally, minus 125 has been the golden standard pressure for 10, 15 years. Everybody's using it for all wounds. But there is problems, because some patients have pain, and pain results from the mechanical pulling on the wound by the suction force. And it also results from the wound dressing pushing into the wound, creating a decrease in blood flow. So by reducing the level of negative pressure, we could reduce those effects. So we said, okay, what's the maximum effect in the wound? What's that pressure? And we found 80. So we could reduce the maximum pressure ever used to 80. And then we said, okay, if we had a poorly vascularized wound that is in need of of further considerations, or if we have pain, what do we do then? Well, now we know we can reduce to 40. So we can reduce the level of negative pressure to 40 and still have wound healing effects, still have biological effects in the wound edge to a little lesser extent, but we still have the effects. So now we have a few hallmarks that we can use for our therapy that are based on scientifically controlled studies. That is one advantage. And there's one more advantage with this pump from a scientific point of view. And that is, there is a therapy that is called intermittent therapy. That is turning pressure on, off, which means the wound is going to contract, contract, decontract. And that is like massaging a wound, which is painful, of course.
Sounds very painful.
And also there's a problem because when you let go, there might be leakage in the dressing, and the dressing may fall off. So that's where we came up with this. You could vary the pressure, cycling it gradually from two different negative pressures, and create the same movement in the wound edge, but less painful for the patient. And also, we were so happy when we received this scientific data that the results in accelerating granulation tissue formation and wound healing are the same as for this intermittent on-off therapy. So that's another advantage with the system.
Historically, patients have required pre-medication for their dressing changes. When you're using Prospera, an antimicrobial gauze, as the wound filler, what we're finding is that the patients require less medication to tolerate the dressing changes. We are also seeing less traumatic wounds associated with the removal of the antimicrobial gauze.
And Dr. Momsho, what can the clinician do to reduce pain in patients during NPWT?
Well, there are different aspects of pain during negative pressure therapy. I first want to describe the pain during treatment. So during the treatment, there is a mechanical deformation of the wound edges, which is obviously painful. If we want to reduce that effect, we can use a continuous pressure. And continuous pressure will not massage the wound edge, it will just keep it constantly contracted. The other way would be to lower the level of negative pressure. And from science, we know that 80 millimeters of mercury, we reach maximum wound healing effects. And at 40, if people still have pain, you can reduce to 40 and still have wound healing effects.
Wow. And the traditional was 125.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So we're saying 80-40 are two hallmarks now. If we really want to have an extra effect on our wound, we want this intermittent therapy, which to reduce pain, maybe switch to variable pressure therapy, where you cycle the pressures gradually to just reduce the pain in the patients. Then I come to the other problem with pain during negative pressure therapy, and that's during dressing change. The reason why you have such pain during dressing change in negative pressure is that the newly formed tissue, the granulation tissue, grows into the wound filler. And once you tear that off, you tear off tissue, and that's painful.
Oh, sounds horrible.
That's when you use foam. If you would use gauze instead, we know from our data that there's no ingrowth into gauze. So removing gauze is less painful for the patient. So I strongly believe that you should use different wound fillers for different types of wounds, but to reduce pain, gauze is a very good alternative.
You know, by using the gauze too, Jackie, since you don't have the ingrowth, you can extend the wear time of the dressing. to where you don't have to change it on the standard of every 48 hours. If normally if you use foam for longer than 48 hours, you have such significant ingrowth of the tissue that's destroyed when you remove the dressing. But when you use gauze, you don't have that ingrowth. So by extending the dressing wear time, you also improve the cost effectiveness of the therapy.
So Cindy, what sets Prospera apart from other manufacturers?
Well, Prospera, obviously, we've done our science, and that guided our development of our pump. But the pump is designed with the negative pressures from 10 to 200 to give the clinician that parameter. But as Dr. Malmshow suggested, that 100% of the blood flow comes in at -80 and about 50% at -40. So we wanted our pump to be able to graduate and fluctuate in small increments. So we set it for 5 millimeters of mercury pressure changes. The pump's lightweight, it's completely silent. Patients don't complain about the noise or the suction, if it's at the bedside at home and by the bed. It's got a color-coded screen. We designed it much like a traffic light for the simplicity of use. Green, if you see a green face on the monitor, it's good to go and the therapy's in action. If you have a yellow-colored screen, it's neutral or it's idle and no therapy is being administered. And if it's red, you have an alarm issue. You have audible as well as visual alarms that tell you that you have a problem. One of the things that I'm really proud that Prospera has designed is what we call a dual filter system. The alarm issues kind of directed us to design the dual filter because when gaseous vapors or fluids get into the pump, the other manufacturers that were out there was no way of telling whether or not the inside components of that pump had been contaminated. So therefore, one pump could be used on patient A and later on patient B and patient C, and without knowingly cross-contaminating these patients.
My gosh.
So, which is a very serious issue. So what Prospera did is we designed a dual filter system. There's an external filter that hopefully would pick up any of the first passage, but we also put an internal filter on the inside so that if any vapor or any liquid got to the inside of that filter, the pump immediately shuts down. Therefore, it saves the internal components of the pump, and the pump doesn't have to be destroyed. And if it got contaminated, it's just simply changing out of the filter. But that was a huge patient safety issue to prevent cross-contamination from patient to patient.
Prospera continues to be an industry leader, bringing the latest research to the forefront, changing the way we all use negative pressure wound therapy. Variable pressure therapy is a very effective mode of therapy. It actually promotes wound healing by oscillating the two pressures, the two recommended pressures by Prospera.
While previously a thought, Prospera has made possible both a comfortable and cost-effective NPWT solution for sufferers of chronic wounds. The Prospera Pro Series pump is designed to offer the latest state-of-the-art negative pressure therapy, providing practitioners with ease of use and patients with peace of mind.
Wow, amazing. Now, Dr. Malmshow, why did Prospera directly challenge the pressure setting when they addressed their new pump?
Well, pressure setting has been one of my focuses in science research and something I've really wanted to implement into clinical practice. Because as golden standard of -125, that's been used for years and years. And now we see from controlled studies that -80 has a maximum effect on the wound edge. And the reason why we wanted to challenge this is, of course, that reducing the level of negative pressure will also reduce the problems with pain and ischemia in poorly vascularized wounds. So now we know we can reduce to 80, and we also know that we can reduce to -40 if we have a really bad wound with poor vascularization and pain. So I think it's been good that this has been challenged, and I'm now seeing, when I'm in the society of other clinicians in the field of negative pressure wound therapy, that this is starting to be implemented in the clinical practice, and I'm very happy about that.
That's terrific. And Dr. Malmshow, what are your thoughts about wound fillers?
I think the type of wound filler has a great impact on the wound healing and the outcome of the wound. Currently we have 2 wound fillers. We have foam and we have gauze. There are a few others, but they haven't been used as widely. Foam produces a thick, sometimes hypertrophic granulation tissue that's a little bit fragile. Gauze produces a thinner granulation tissue, but it's very stable. So there are different effects, and these can be used in different wounds for optimization. So just to take an example, if you have a large acute wound that would be changed under anesthetics, so you wouldn't have the problem with dressing change and pain, well, foam would be a perfect alternative. While if you'd had a small wound where you have frequent dressing changes and you don't want the ingrowth problem, then gauze might be a very good opportunity. And gauze is also rather easy to apply to regular wounds. But what I think is that in the future we're going to see loads of wound fillers. I think we're going to have different wound fillers for different types of wounds, because we need different effects for different wounds. Not every wound looks the same. And there's a massive research going on now to try and optimize the wound filler.
Very interesting. Cindy, how did Prospera come up with the variable pressure therapy concept that Dr. Malchow was talking about?
Well, the science that we did actually drove us to do variable pressure therapy, which we use the acronym VPT. But variable pressure therapy is one of the things that sets the Prospera pumps apart from the other manufacturers. The ability, in reference to what Dr. Malchow was saying, the ability to massage this tissue in a soft wave format is showing us clinically a tremendous positive outcomes, and especially using it in chronic wounds that have been stalled or stagnant for several weeks or months. It seems though when you add the variable pressure therapy to them, that it kind of jump starts that tissue and it reactivates that tissue and it comes back alive. So you'd have to say that the science really told us to do the variable pressure therapy, because the original research about the intermittent showed that intermittent outgranulated continuous mode of therapy. But there were two problems that Dr. Malchow referred to, and that was the pain and the dressing leaks. So our challenge was to take that advantage of tissue growth and reduce the pain and make sure we had proper dressing seals.
And Dr. Malchow, can you describe the complication of tissue ingrowth?
Well, tissue ingrowth, it's a rather simple mathematical problem. It's if you have a porous structure and you put that into a wound, tissue will grow into that filler. And when you remove the filler, then there might be pain. And you will also remove some of that newly formed tissue. So that's basically the problems with ingrowth. And ingrowth can be overcome by either putting gauze, where we know we don't have ingrowth, or some people use foam and use a non-adherent wound contact layer underneath. But a wound contact layer should only be used to protect exposed vasculature or organs in a wound bed.
One of the things we see clinically in the field is that patients that go over the weekend for dressing changes, the longer the dressing or the wound filler is intact with the tissue, the worse the ingrowth is. So for patients who are non-compliant because of pain issues or whatever that don't come in for regular dressing changes, their tissue damage can be severe.
So then it just compounds itself. It becomes
Yes,
a
it
vicious
does.
cycle.
Yeah.
Wow. Ugh. Now, Dr. Malchow, how do you recommend that the clinician optimize NPWT?
During this talk, we've outlined three different ways of altering the therapy. There's a pressure setting, there's a wound filler, and there's a modality to which you use the therapy. So pressure settings, well, use maximum -80. When you have pain or poorly perfused tissue, risk of ischemia, reduce to 40. When it comes to wound fillers, we have foam, we have gauze, and when there's a problem with ingrowth, use gauze. When there's a large acute wound with no problems with ingrowth and you just want to fill that wound, well, then use foam. But here I think we're seeing a enormous development in the future, and I think in a few years we'll have different wound fillers. And when it then comes to pressure modality, if we need to really get the granulation tissue growing in that wound, we need to massage the wound. By using variable pressure therapy and the smooth cycling, it will create the same wound healing as intermittent therapy at less expense for the patient.
Interesting. So to sum it up, what do you see in the future of wound treatment, Cindy, and how much of a difference do you hope that Prospera's NPWT innovation is going to make?
Well, as you know, wound healing is a very complex science.
Obviously.
There's no easy A to Z book to go by, although there's thousands of literature out there to help you. Basically, what we would like to see is, you know, as we understand more and more science about wound healing, obviously new products are going to be developed. But as far as Prospera's focus with negative pressure, we're already implementing the knowledge that we have learned from the controlled studies at Lund University. We're already implementing and seeing positive outcomes in the field. So in the future, I would like to think that negative pressure could be administered more safely to patients by skilled clinicians in a cost-effective manner and still have a positive outcome, because it's all about the patient's quality of life.
Wow. Well, it truly seems to me to be a major breakthrough when a medical treatment turns out to be more effective, less painful, and at the same time less costly. So thank you for introducing us to this, first of all, Cindy.
Thank you, Jackie, very much.
And Dr. Malmshow, thanks to you as well for sharing your vast knowledge on the subject.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. For 21st Century Health, I'm Jackie Bales.
This and other 21st century business topics are always easily accessible right from your computer. Visit us at 21cbtv.com.